Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jeep Journals. Today is Monday, April 4th, and today's the day I got this idea for my first hit, and you can tell people are moaning to it already. And in this first hit, the spark of inspiration that occurred was the storm system that basically is blowing through our nation right now. I saw this picture and I couldn't help but think that some of us are doing the least amount in terms of putting in any effort to restore the health of our lands. And in order to do that, of course, we need to do the same to ourselves first. And then once we take control of ourselves, we can manifest that health that basically confirms all that you are desiring to confirm. Am I on the right path? Is what people are often asking. So I was going to say, are you on the right path? And I think sometimes the way that we word things is heard in the wrong mindset, and we're just out of phase, because to talk about stuff like confirmation, it's a very heavy subject. And in order to talk about it in a lighthearted manner, I have to really be almost emotionally detached from what's going on. So as I'm talking, I'm telling you, this whole thing that you're hearing right now, this whole spark of information was triggered from seeing a picture of the current weather across the nation, where I could only think that somehow we have the possibility of restoring the health of our lands. And you'll have to excuse me a moment. I don't know what this is. It's apparently a piece of breakfast, which was some blueberries. And now I can see why that other character doesn't have breakfast yet before he records his sparks of information. It's because there are fewer interruptions, which is, again, tied into this topic that I'm telling you, which is occurring during, when was this presentation recorded? On the second Monday, April 4th of Lent. Now, the year is 2022, according to the calendar system that we are aware of. And today I'm talking about sparks of innovation, and today I came up with the words, the first few words to this hit song, while being emotionally detached, not the same as spiritually detached, emotionally detached, while being emotionally detached from seeing the picture that I saw, which triggered this immense thought. There's an immense thought when I see an entire state that shows red for weather warnings. There's something unusual about that. And it's very unusual because when have you, if you're of my age set, which I'm 45, which means anyone who grew up without or with technology can remember, if they've lived in one place long enough, which is rarer and rarer with people who are moving all about the nation, if you can remember your own personal area of weather and the beauty that was around you, and how temperate the nights were on days when you would reach approximately the 90s for the daily high. When an entire state is lit up in weather warnings, in order for me to think of anything inspired or of inspiration, I have to have been not only devastated by seeing this profound situation, but also creative enough to try and figure out, how do we resolve that? In our minds, we know how to resolve certain conflict. If a conversation is escalating out of control and only one side is the one who's raising their voice in a destructive manner, where they would raise their hand to strike the child, so to speak, when it's not being done I'm not going to talk about the morality, I'm going to say when it's not being done as a constructive reinforcement that there might be dire consequences from doing something. Like, let's say a child reaches for a pot handle and it's on the stove and the water's boiling. If the child is reaching for that, you have to immediately swat their hand down. By logic. Some people might not panic, or might just understand they can put their hand between the handle and the kid's hand, because we have what's called coordination, and that's due to knowledge. We learned to walk because we became aware that falling down sometimes would lead to getting hurt. And we forget about this for a time frame. Let's say, for an example, the people who maybe still have the luxury of going to those corporate activities where they play sports together. We can do certain physical activities, but if someone has not practiced those lines of sport or those habits of reinforcing the body's cellular structure by exercise and better nutrients, if we're not doing that, we might very well, boom, injure ourselves. And I did boom, and the power for the car went off approximately 7 minutes into this segment. So I had the car on for a little while. It was showing the picture that I'm talking about that's inspired this lightning bolt of knowledge for you. For those of you especially who are biased against symbolism of all sorts. If we are biased, we're simply not joyful and we can't hear the message, the good news. If we can't hear the good news, what's the point of waking up? You know, when you wake up and you believe in a higher power, you believe anything is possible, including the manifestation of weather itself. So if you believe in that, and you look at a day like today that has these glorious shades of color diffused through the clouds because of the sun, you know the sun is shining on even the darkest night, rainiest day, stormiest afternoon. You know the sun is shining. And as long as you can remember, then you can be living in a state of beauty and glory. And we do absorb people's health, and we also distribute certain energies back and forth. So, yesterday I had the great pleasure of walking with one of my best friends of all time out here in Friedrich Wilderness area, where when he and I visited this place, it was a wilderness area. And I can only wonder if it was because I was walking with my friend who basically, since the onset of COVID, the coronavirus, the thing that separated many friendships due to just inherent stress and other factors that I can't possibly perceive from your perspective. All I can know as I think about the things that led to the separations and the distances in time that have occurred between friendships is that there are certain egotistical tendencies that cause us to delay paying attention to that which is important. And that which is important is What? We believe in a higher power. And I'll go so far as to say this: if you're watching this and you're begging to pardon because there's a difference, I want you to hesitate and ask, is it because of something that I said grammatically different that can just be clarified as almost the same thing anyway? In other words, if you're happy, usually it's because you have some kind of you have love. And if you have love, you're able to nourish that which is around you. And if a friendship, a basic friendship, is nourished, if that can somehow cause a cellular restructuring, I wanted to see if these things were true by just saying, if you're listening and you don't understand what I'm saying, or you do and you're kind of upset about what I'm saying, then you're probably able to look at this and start wondering if you should be upset about things, or if the upset is just basic egocentric judgment. Judgment that I can focus on the whole topic for long enough to tell you all of this was coming from a picture I saw where an entire state is under weather advisories. We now have weather phenomenon such as, you name it. Here, where I remember growing up for 44 plus years, the weather always had nights that would be in about almost the 70s, whenever the days were going to be in the 90s. So here we have some unusual weather as well, and I think it's kind of buffering us from the heat, from the absolute heat. It's like, even though it's off, it's not off enough for us unless we are paying attention fully to remember. And so I would like to call your attention in San Antonio to one of the weather anomalies that I believe is true. And some people might be able to pull numbers, and the numbers will say, aha, this is how I can prove to you this has always been the case. And then some people will just simply remember from their own memory rather than deferring to or having to defer to a book. That's the same premise as what happened here. In this story, in my story, in your story. Without faith, we simply will not do the right thing. With faith, it's really hard to misstep. Even those things that were seemingly negative, as you heard the car horn, confirmation, will be a blessing. We can heal our own selves. We can heal our land. And we can heal others. If you don't believe that we can heal our land, take a look at some of my prior segments that I've posted about this very topic. Gardening as ways of encouraging our children to participate in health. Health is wealth. Until we can relate one storyteller to another, we're going to have difficulty. So that's why I had to write this hit song, because I saw an entire state suffering. How do I help? if I feel like I can say how to help, how we can manage our wildernesses so they're not just fire waiting to happen from anything, from a regular lightning storm, from a winter lightning storm that has tornadoes, things that we didn't used to have, from anything. The global warning, even as daunting as it should seem, is just, are we panicked or not? And some of us are panicking a bit too much, and that panic is causing some interesting things. And as we let go, then we're able to focus on things and not have to defer to a book to understand that the teachings of peace were the basic underpinnings of how we restore our own wellness. And those motivational speakers and musicians, they all know it. They got it. Or at least they got it in the message that they shared in the music. You know, it's a beautiful day. Let's go for a walk with Ray. It's a beautiful day. And it is. I can hear the birds chirping outside. Right now I'm talking here in this format during this extended period of reflection for some of us, myself included. We can recognize that we can do a lot better, especially if we're passing that information along the lineage. Could be a grandparent, could be a parent, or it could be not so very apparent unless someone explains it in just the way that has a meaningful and lasting message. A message that we would care to share. The only thing holding us back from levels of success is overcoming the barriers, which often include the very circumstances that we think would be the easiest to overcome. So, to put things clearly, if you believe in peace and you understood these messages, and if we are able to command our own health, and I'm able to command the health of the environment around me, then I command peace. And I don't know if you know, but the car next to me turned off the car, even though they parked there maybe about a few minutes ago. Now there's more peace, so you can hear the birds chirping more. See? So everything I'm about to experience is in the real world. And a lot of people tell me that they work in the real world. They're like, well, in the real world, this is how we have to do it. And that's basically how I've heard parents telling their children as they were walking on these very same trails. And that's the same thing I heard yesterday, as a matter of fact. The shortcomings in everything that we do are only the ability to put out that light, and you can do it literally either way that you can interpret that. Put out that light. Hold it out and share it so someone else can see it, or just put it out of fear. And I'm talking about that as in the format of illumination. We can either illuminate one another's lives, or we can darken each other's lives. But oftentimes the choice is, it's our own. So all of these things are things that are challenging to grasp if you're not in a mindset where you can think not just linearly but exponentially. If you're truly a deep thinker, you understand. I'm saying, I've got 2 cars parked next to me. Both of them have people in the seats. I feel like I could be viewed as a crazy person recording this message. But I'm not really worried. It's just that I can hear the ego suggesting certain things to be aware of, and that's fine. I believe that most of us are being operated by the ego, though. Did you hear that? And at the same time, as I said, I'm recording this hoping that people understand my father was robbed. Confirmation. My father was robbed by his own family. I even feel like I should say that inclusively. I never robbed my father, except that now that I know he needs help, like from his own family, he doesn't value me the same way that he would give me any regard if I had if I had a ton of money, which I do. I will always have as much as I need to accomplish what it is that I need to accomplish. The thing is, of all of it, the timing. And if you're hearing this, then you're understanding this was a topic that we've discussed in the past. The timing of it all. And the timing tells a story of either there was participation to help build that momentum, or nothing. But what's achievable by the individual with only the power of God, a higher power, with only the power of a higher power, can achieve exponentially and infinitely greater accomplishments than someone who's tied only to man first. Man made rules first. The two are so similar, and yet the health and overall well-being that shines through when someone follows that path is so apparent that anyone can accept and understand peace. Peace is peace. Anxiety oftentimes requires us to operate while subconsciously knowing that what we're doing is not for a good cause. It's not going to achieve anything that glorifies our higher power. If your parents left you something and entrusted you with something, or your friends entrusted you with something, how would you honor that? So These are the basic questions that come to my mind, all tied to the weather anomalies that are the primary reason I'm talking about this whole circumstance as being tied together as one topic. Without somebody inspiring the person who appreciates nature to be in a place like this and to nurture it, by also blessing it with the words of good. As we do that, and as nature recognizes those who are there to bless nature, nature will present herself automatically, because we are nature. And if we don't nourish nature and tend to it in ways that mitigate the destructive forces that the negative entity has come here to do, to kill, steal, and destroy. As we do these things to mitigate that type of outcome in the spirit of peace, confirmation. Remember, this plane is flying by. It's a plane load of fellow us, bringers of light. As a bringer of light, and I don't want to brag about it or anything like that. My voice did that automatically, and I just made a nervous joke just now. In case you don't understand the way that I talk. I don't mean to brag, but a bringer of light brings extreme joy and happiness. And so, in general, we are always ready to be extremely joyful and happy. And we are. The number one thing that gets us off track from being happy all the time is becoming worried about something worldly. And the main reason that happens is because we get caught in the teachings of our fathers. And I mean that dynamically. Some of what our fathers taught us is no longer applicable, and it never maybe was. But it's no longer applicable to be able to go to the big box stores and buy bottles of poison sold in poisonous containers, wrapped in additional poison wrappers. If we have something like that continuing to be sold, even though we know the destructive forces are causing weather anomalies that we are being subjected to, and if all of the population is like, oh, I'm building a new place, I'm going to build a new place, and I'm going to go build this other place, and none of the population is saying, I'm going to nurture what I've got right now, because that will nourish everything that's tangible to me. And then no matter what effort levels that we put in, we would achieve. And we wouldn't care who trumped who. We would understand dynamically the story. And dynamically the story would tell you, that guy was wronged. He got super nailed for supposedly what he did. Makes you wonder. Why would we want to wrong anyone else if the whole meaning behind, hey, in order for you to not suffer the consequences, be happy. Know that know as in KNOW, that there is a higher power. And we can see that If we can't see that in another person, which sometimes that's the only mindset that people have, we can see it in nature. If we can't see it in nature, we can see it wherever. We can see it in a symbolism. If we can't see it in symbolism, I'll tell you what, the number one easiest thing to remember is we have to see it in ourselves. And until we see the beauty of what positivity is, until we understand that positivity has and will continue to be wronged as long as we practice what we don't preach, and as long as it's okay and acceptable to do that, for all of that time frame, we will continue to experience problems, and they're going to magnify, and that magnifying glass is going to go across, just like the third eclipse headed our way. It's going to go across that nation, and if under that third up close look, where we look into the mirror, where we look into ourselves, maybe that which was sown illogically or garnished unfairly, stolen from the only child, his life, in the case of the only child that I was speaking of, from the symbol. It's all tied together, no matter how you think about it. It's all tied together. We either think with our ego and we get mad at the things we're thinking out of fear, or we go, I believe. I actually believe in this. This makes sense. I believe so much that means I can put that first all the time, and my whole world will change. Well, in order to do that and have the symbolism behind it and the hit song that told you today on April 4th, 2022, it looks like a nation's getting hammered, and not in a fun way, whichever fun way you might think about that. It's getting weather battered. And that's not necessarily a great thing. I mean, it's the balance that's needed. But remember, in order to have these situations that necessitate that level of violence, there has to be a need to have that level of belief instilled. And sometimes that's where distributing the good word, anytime that you see it, comes in so logically, carefully, and peacefully requested of you to absolutely share this video if it made you think. If you're listening to this and thinking, this guy, he's off his rocker, he needs to take some kind of singularity, personality, prescriptions of some sort, the topic is all the same. If you take this food and eat from it as if it were the body of the seemingly peaceful person who was nailed to the cross, you would eat it with not necessarily, and you have to imagine eating like either another human or another not so human representative. If you were to eat something like that was totally not normally on your menu, how do you feel? Are you hearing, take this and eat from it, this is my body? Are you hearing it with a level of reverence, with the literal meaning? Can your mind even take that thought? But the peacemaker in the story that I'm talking about said that. Take this and eat from it, this is my body. Take this and drink from this is my blood. How would other people have thought that? Would they think in a crass way, like many of us who are so adult? Or would they think like a child and go, understand? They're understanding that there was this sacrifice. They're humbled. That's the same as eating any meat-based product. Anytime we receive some kind of a food that was taken from meat, we should see it that way, but we don't. And so nations are falling apart right now at the seams. And to say these words in a way that links it all together and to share it takes social presence. Overhead confirmation, social presence. We can either fly around the nation with our meetings and with our orchestrated trips where we still hand out pallets of bottled water, or we can start living like this is actually it. This is it. How do we do this in a way that makes sense? And the way to do it is basically all we're doing, as long as we're giving thanks, it really doesn't matter. The things that are issues will seemingly receive their own balancing. So it really doesn't pay us any difference to think about the deep, super deep thoughts that could be haunting us with anxiety, trouble sleeping, trouble focusing on a thought long enough to understand, man, this he's giving out some real advice. I've been denying it the whole time. And by I mean, I definitely mean the ones who aren't sharing these videos, who are watching it through for this long. And for some reason, now I recognize I have an ego issue. I've been there. I totally have been there myself. There are levels of wisdom which are achieved only throughout the course of time. And there are levels of wisdom that are achieved when we actually open our mind and think for ourselves for the first time. Instead of being so mad at somebody that you can't talk with them, think back and go, why am I mad? What was the conversation? Instead of linking it directly to this emotion of disdain, what was the trigger? Was there a conversation that had been repeated many times? And that's the thing that basically we just went in circles around over and over and over. And if that conversation was something that was repeated so frequently that we didn't ever accept finally, hey, there is something to this fasting period of Lent. If I have something I love to do, I should give it up. And by giving it up, it means maybe I should offer it to other people instead to enjoy with me as a celebration and not just take it just for myself. Maybe I should share. Maybe I should think in the way that peacemaker was talking about thinking. And maybe I can see in myself that same peacemaker walking around and going, hey, we got this. The weather's going to get nutty in some places. What needs to happen will happen. And all we can do is continue to live like a child. Enjoy the fact that we could fall down. Recognize that our bodies, if they're not tempered, if they're not regularly synchronized to that level of joy that we talk about having, then the body will show the results of not living a joyful life. You can see it. For me, my direct family member was robbed. And then they were only robbed after all of the other family took many actions to obscure truth. From the person who was mentally ailing and literally set the house on fire to the only child who, where's my income? When you hear that I'm doing these things and I left my corporate position and that I'm raising awareness for these situations, where's my blessing in return? And my blessing is I have everything I could need, and I can go and repel those ill forces by just talking about these beautiful things. If I walk into these forests long enough and talk about these beautiful things, it'll repel all the things that shouldn't be in there from there. Like, for an example, anyone carrying in rubbish to throw all over the trails. That rubbish is killing nature. Nature not breathing fully causes temperature variances, which results in an entire state going into a weather warning alert. We are not immune from this. In Texas, we have many situations that are at the helm that will manifest, and all we can do is just at the last second pray. Or we can also, in this very moment, do everything we do as if it were a prayer. And I can feel the breeze blowing through. Every time I really start talking in a way that's profound, anytime I'm praying like this, you'll see it almost like a Texas twister will come through the scrub, the desert scrub, all the way from across the desert. You can hear it like the ocean, the wind coming in, and then it'll pass right over you, taking your prayers, lifting them up with certainty that we can together achieve much greater results than the individual, especially when they put their beliefs in man. And when I say they, what I mean is I'm not believing in man. I've not believed in man for a long time. The only difference is now I even question the motherhood itself, the very aspects of nurturing. And I mean this across the spectrums. I don't even know how to say it, except for if a grandmother and or great grandmother would keep the contact information for her own brother from her brother's son, only son, me, then to me, there's no heart, there's no nurturing. And our grandparents that I recall were not like that. Our grandparents were very nurturing. So something in our nation is occurring in a way where there's going to be a demonstrated reduction in what is not sustainable. And that might include entire states, nations, economies, ecosystems, everything. I mean, it could be considered not just against one species even. It's basically, this is something that we need to consider in that as we are left to continue to be the stewards of this beautiful place that we are able to enjoy, it behooves us to, again, maintain ourselves. So I'm talking a lot, and I'm telling you all these stories, and I'm telling you how difficult for most people that it had been to adhere to the most basic of theoretical promises, to just recognize and give gratitude to a higher power. Most people cannot stop eating even one certain thing. And so in my household, we've gone without meat-based products, without, any form of meat. And by that, I mean, not even seafood. And when I say not even seafood, what I mean is meat. And anytime you're talking about eating animals, if I was eating insects even, that would be, to me, I would consider that as some type of a life I was taking off the bat. And the fact of all of this matter, and the reason this matters is because, again, with, all of these biosphere phenomenon that are occurring, you got to wonder, maybe is the production of food and the volume of food that we produce for all of the masses that are continuing to expand, if we're doing that on such a scale that it could contribute to some of these things, should we at least maybe for that period of fasting, for our religion, for our grandparents, to honor our fathers, maybe we should do something like that. But many people can't even fathom, because the thing that's being abused, whether it's food, whether it's sugars, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's whatever, all these things are just passive entertainments to keep our minds from remembering we got something serious going on right now. If our inner self can't even see our self, like if we can't really see our reflection, if we can't look at ourselves in the mirror, if we can't during the eclipse withstand the scorching elements that are gonna ensue or whatever. I'm only mentioning this eclipse thing kind of as a half joke, and it's not a joke, but I'm mentioning it because in some other volumes, if you do research on where an eclipse crosses a nation 3 times, there are significant changes that occur in the management. So as far as whether or not these legends from other eras are true or not, I'm not really debating it. I'm not worried about it, because whatever is meant to be will drive us into those directions where we're supposed to be at that point in time for whatever reason, over and over. And yesterday when I walked on this trail, I basically got to see a porcupine in the wild, which I'm putting the clip in right now because I think it absolutely deserves recognition. And at the same time, I want to command anyone who is watching this to who learns the location of this animal to leave the animal in peace, and to understand that it takes an awareness of the animal in order to interact with it, just like we would a domestic pet, for an example. The same can be said of snakes. Some animals are more fearful by nature, and also depending on our own level of how often we fall down as in accordance with how animals are viewing us. In other words, like let's say you're a careless adult elder who are hiking the trails and constantly falling down and don't really have the power to push yourself back up. You might want to start working on push-ups, just as a thought, and you can do it by doing a search on this very platform saying how to do push-ups for seniors if you're an older person. And these search terms are terms that you yourself can fine-tune to whatever level you perceive yourself as. And when I perceive myself, sometimes I perceive myself in a much younger category range, in a range where it's like, I could go and play a football game, but if I have not been preparing for that, if all I've been doing is just a mediocre, moderate level walk, then maybe I will at least withstand the very thought of getting out in a higher temperature when I'm typically accustomed to being in an air-conditioned or temperature climate-controlled environment. If I'm not capable of walking around outside when the temperatures change, for an example, and if I, just from going up and over a short incline, if I have a problem, I become aware at that point that there's some kind of a thing that's not able to withstand some of the variances, like an entire state going into a climate watch warning mode. If we get to that point, some people may not naturally be able to overcome if the grid goes out and you can't use power like a basic portable fan for a period of time. If we can't withstand temperature variances, like if the power goes out and we happen to be in the cold for a little longer than normal, if we cannot do that, just like with nature, who is out and about in these woods where we got to see a porcupine yesterday, just like that, then in today's world, as of April 4th, 2022, in today's world, we have just as much likelihood of enduring some of these things that the animals out in the wild are enduring. And so we have the capacity during Lent to think, maybe I should, instead of buying so much food for myself and being in comfort all the time and teaching my children the same thing, maybe I can buy some bird feeders and feed the birds. Maybe I can look at the habitat that I'm steward of, that I'm the land that's a reflection of me. And if I can't stand to look at that reflection of me, then I need to put in the energy to restore it. And in restoring these reflections of ourselves, we're restoring ourselves. So this is why I talk about the importance of just, blocking what you need to block. And to do that, to block what you need to block, all you have to do is be absolutely open to talking the conversation through so fully that it gets into people's thoughts, because the ego can hear something and think on it. The spirit, when the ego is not quick to keep whispering, you hate this person, you hate this person. When the ego stops whispering the lies or yelling, shouting the lies, then the spirit can be heard. And when the spirit can be heard, you're hearing, well, I really could have used a different approach. I didn't have to be so, use those words or you know what I mean? When you think in hindsight of the things that caused conflicts with some of your closest relationships, be it between father and son, as in my example, or father and son, as in your example. And by father and son, I mean no disrespect. What I mean is, between any relationship where there is a mentor and a mentee, where somebody feels so slighted that people can't communicate, all I have to say is, approach that with love, and that's about all you can do, and put in the efforts that are required. But at a certain point, when someone is of the entity where they can kill, steal, and destroy, where they can actively strike at you and physically assault you, perhaps maybe these are when certain weather anomalies begin to occur, if that's how the mindset of most of our fathers are. I really don't know. What I do know is that, again, there are things that separate all of the negative activity, that command the activity to become aware and to re-educate themselves using all of the information, not just the snippets that appear to the ego. And when that re-assimilation happens, people can either become extremely shameful of the wrongs that they've done, because they don't know how to even begin to apologize for the filth that has been committed, or they can understand that although we know that there is filth being committed, we know it from being able to leverage out that filth. It takes one to know one. And so maybe if our people are not thinking in levels of peace like that, maybe we're instead thinking, this guy, he's ranting for so long. I hate, long talks, get to the point. But you'll never understand until you understand that you've gone almost 1 hour understanding that we were talking about Lent and what it had to do with healing the land, and how many words it took to keep me for 1 more hour from doing something that I possibly shouldn't have been doing, or that I should have been doing in my case. I should have been going for a walk instead of recording this. However, because you are my market, I encourage you to share the good word by simply subscribing to help do the free things, right? If you subscribe to this channel, and if I get to 1,000 subscribers, then basically I monetize this channel. In the beginning, you only needed 100 subscribers. You hear the airplane, it's like confirmation. This is my noisy way of raising any income whatsoever. I think it'd be cool to be a monetized channel on YouTube. Help me to get there. And the way that you help me to get there is A, subscribe, B, interact. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, how much was too brainy, and whether it was really too brainy at all or not. You see, if you understand what I'm saying and you think that I'm not really all that crazy because you've literally interacted with me beyond just this social platform, and you see this and it makes sense that our children might need to plant the seeds of hope, and to plant the seeds of hope, it might also require that the parents do the same thing. And if the parents do the same thing, then basically we have almost a laying down of arms. We're putting our arms down, like literally we're seeding the garden together. And those thoughts of war and anxiety and apologies, they start turning into, we're all just children of one state of physical capability or another. And some people fall down a lot. And once we learn to stop falling down, then we accept responsibility in that manner. Some people forget to give up the responsibility when they lose that capacity, and where they start teetering all over the place and becoming a risk to not only themselves, but to others around them. And some people remain strong all the way, but then mentally are not strong enough to stay on a path where it's like, hey, this is a period of maybe not even mourning. This is a period of celebrating the fact that I believe there was some kind-hearted person that had just enough wherewithal to use just the right examples to be recognized in a way that helped people just like you and I who were suffering from anxiety to become healthy again. To become healthy, for me, there's no nightmares. It's the anxiety was really happening in real life. And until I fully accepted, I don't need to deal with that anymore. And I didn't. And now, the main thing is the self-control with the physical. Spiritually, I feel like a child all the time. It's like I'm open to learning more. I learn more, teach me more, feed me more. I'm hungry for this knowledge. And then physically, it's like I've begun to retemper myself. And I wanted to say during these last 2 Mondays of Lent that this is a working week for me. So as you see me talking here and wondering, man, I wish I had all this free time and all that, imagine I go back and add those little snippets that I said I was going to add to this video, which means that I'm going to listen to it for about an hour while I'm adding the snippets of video. Whatever I see today will be incorporated throughout this video, by the way. So if I see a lot of nature, which I hope to after my walk with my friend yesterday, especially since we saw so many things that were absolutely amazing, and I expect to showcase that throughout this video. And this video is going to be one of the first of a segment that says, that talks about how to die respectively, or prospectively, what it's like to die, I should say. They're terribly phrased analogies, because in some cases, if I've got to tell you, this is not telling you to do anything. This is telling you, in my mind, I wanted to set up a situation where it was so whirlwind fast that someone believed that I'd literally died and been reborn as another person. And that's basically the power of believing like a child in the words and not being so egotistically obsessive about what it's going to sound like when you say it, that you say it in a way that's meaningful and profound. This is not about dying. This is about totally bringing yourself back to life. To bring yourself back to life, it takes nourishing not just the body, but also the mind. And you really do need to pay attention to your spirit, your soul. There's definitely a 3-in-1 element to tending to ourselves. There was one person I listened to all the time when I drove across the nation before the satellite subscription robbed me out of my out of my satellite content, and so now at this point in time, I like to go with even less and less. So when you go out into the woods, if you're not needing to buy plastic bottles of water, then in those organized groups where you get together and share trips, think about it. Make sure that you are not taking this same circumstance into the wild that we're trying to prevent from exponentially growing even in public right now. We have to take those actions to become that which we want to see. So thanks again for joining me. I'm going to go and enjoy the trails and basically enjoy the talks. You know, there are so many people that I get to talk with, whether or not I come here with somebody. And in every case, these spiritual talks, especially when we have two people learning together, are so absolutely profound, and they're beautiful, and you can see it, you know, when you sit together with someone who's just as amazed about what it's like to feel like being a child again, and letting go of that anxiety. They're just as amazed in a way where they know. And we're getting some rain now. I don't know if you can hear it. Do you hear that? How lucky we are to get rain at this rate, at this time. The bird, you hear the cardinals are singing. Getting a light shower. It's like I'm timing this walk like no other walk has been timed before, perfectly. And confirmation. I haven't been looking for the planes. I've been hearing them, but I think we saw it. We saw this one. So I hope that you're having a blessed day. I hope that you understand when I talk about the things that I'm talking about, where if we look at imagery and make a snap decision, then we're sometimes doing something that's counterproductive to manifesting a glorious life. Instead, we're manifesting judgment, which is anxiety, which shows up as physical manifestations. And if we're teetering around and tripping on things and falling on stuff throughout the very house that we are the stewards of, we might have a situation where we might need to put ourselves and our things back into order. And if we're not able to put our things back into order, even if someone is there to help, then it could be that we need to take responsibility for our own actions, and we need to help someone else after we are able to successfully navigate the paths that we've already tended to anyways, and constantly be aware of the changing situation. Just because the surface is one way one day doesn't mean it's going to be the same way the next day. You know, just look at the areas where there is land erosion and homes that are falling off of the cliffs, you know. These are all things, again, manifestations of tending to that which is around us or not tending to that which is around us. And so when I talk about why it's important for more than one person to know as quickly as possible, I talk about it because, like, let's just say, for an example, I've got a perfectly manicured, perfectly everything ecosystem going on in my own sphere. Well, what if everyone around is still burning the house down? There's still a possibility that my own house might catch fire if all of the places around me catch fire. So these are just things to think about in terms of why you want to share this good information, especially with your neighbors, on the trails that you happen to cross together. As you're cultivating this, the thing that doesn't need to be in this dwelling of goodness will typically remove itself, you know. And you can even talk with plants that are growing in a certain direction, and you can't expect immediate results, of course. But let's say you have a plant that's between a passing way and a house, and this plant has thorns on it. If you really do your best, especially because the water molecules that you're pouring are just the same, I don't know if you heard that, but they're the same as the water molecules that are in the plants or in yourself, are coming out of the tap. It's just water, and when I say just water, it's so amazingly important to it's like the health being tied, to the body, mind, and spirit. There's a binding element of life, and when you recognize life, you value it. And if you value life, you don't just, let's just put this in these plastic, disposable things which have more plastic around it and plastic to seal it. Let's put as much of this neat life-saving stuff in that, and we wouldn't take it for granted that it took so many bottles of water to even make that plastic bottle to begin with, because the resources that were needed to create that plastic bottle were such that they were destructive. And so the delivery method, it's got an intent, but it's not as pure as the manufacturer would lead you to believe. So with all of these things in mind, again, I had 2 cars, spots surrounding me, and then empty, and then filled again. And now one of the persons who took their hike is already back to their car, and they're about to take off. So that kind of really cues me in that I'm going to also take off right now, guys. I could talk forever. I know that you're listening. I know that you're understanding what I'm talking about. And because I've seen the subscription uptick already, I'm watching this stuff live possibly. And mostly because I wanted this hit song to do what it needed to do. And so I hope that you understand the power of why thinking about certain things, not just out of tragedy, can help to alleviate the anxiety. If you understand that our dreams are not meaningless, if you journal your dreams, like literally journal your dreams that you had the night before, you'll start to recognize patterns. And also you'll sharpen your mind. And as you sharpen your mind, you'll be able to focus on things long enough to understand that during this period of Lent, I've gone without meat for that period of time so far. And I fully expect to succeed at this. It's not even this genuflection, and to totally and ultimately convey how much I respect and regard the message of peace. I want to up the level such that by the end of Lent, and my videos are pretty much going to be coming out 2 weeks after they were recorded. By the end of the 2 weeks that you've started watching this video, you'll notice a significant change physically in me. And if you don't, then it's possible you're not looking closely enough, but you don't want to look in the mirror. But if you start looking, and seeing and understanding that we're all the same and we're a representation of each other, and that until that energy really started and really kind of gathered some momentum, you'll understand that I was for a long time trying to make this very simple thing even more simple by asking my own father to at least hear some of the songs that I was trying to make. And he had a lot of difficulty hearing the words. And it wasn't just because I was a terrible singer. It was because the words were of goodness. They had a quick little story that went to him, and the story was never recognized by my father, and I found out by many of our fathers, because the story was just touching on subjects that maybe brought anxiety to someone's mind when they started to think about, well, what if this is true? What if we did put down our arms and now we help one another? What if we did, take away the ego and start thinking, I'll never bring these pallets of water bottles to anywhere again? What if we did teach our children immediately the same thing and not consider that trying to tell someone else how to live? What if we did go without for a period of reflection to the for the greater good. What if we did do this so that our lands could heal? What would happen then? The only way to know is, well, we've got to talk about that, and to have that subject as something that gets covered properly, we've got to talk about it, believe it, and what's the other thing besides faith that's required? Does anyone remember? Take action. And to take action means to do something about all that you're seeing, and do it in a way that you know would be honoring our creators. You know, honoring our Father and our Creator. And there's only one way to do that, and that's to look through the adversity, and don't even use that as a bearing. Look through the anxiety. That's not part of the bearing. Look only for the perfect solution. And every time, anything else associated with it it's paid for. The only time we struggle is when we go all around trying to figure out, you know, how to get from one point that we can see that we just came from to the other point that we can see where we started to begin with. It's like, if we only need to know that, as long as we keep our bearing, as long as we have those points of reference, we don't need anything else. Fear doesn't need to play into it if there's some wildlife that we encounter on the trail. Fear shouldn't be something that happens if suddenly the creek bed begins to fill with water. The first thing that we need to do, and of course, if we're not physically able to accomplish these things, we shouldn't be in these areas to begin with. But the first thing we need to do is to find a way of safely stopping that child from reaching up and grabbing the burning pot and pulling it down. Only a higher power knows that this would cause significant damage to the child. And so someone might, however they do it, whether it was an over eager corrective slap to the hand, or whether it was a hand between the handle and the child's hand, however it was done, may it be done in a way that mitigated the trauma that we know would happen if we were looking out and being the safekeeper of that child that was being raised. That in the same way, may we look at one another and understand that when someone is in dire need of assistance, may God help guide the hands that help those people so that they're not traumatized further along the way. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, peace, love, and all that old school stuff.